In Washington and here in Florida, lawmakers are taking aim at one particular issue: verifying U.S. citizenship in elections. Two proposals, one federal and one state, are advancing at the same time. We break down for you what they would do, how they differ, and we compare the reasons being given for this move against actual data on the behavior of voters. At the federal level, it's called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act. It would require documentary proof of U.S. citizenship. A passport or birth certificate would be required to register to vote in federal elections. It would also require photo identification when casting a ballot. Citizenship is already required under federal law to vote. The SAVE Act would change how that eligibility is verified. In Florida, House Bill 991 takes a similar approach. The bill requires citizenship verification through state and federal databases. It would place voters whose citizenship cannot be immediately confirmed into an unverified status, preventing them from voting until documentation is provided. Both measures rely on the same premise, that non-citizen voting poses a significant threat to election integrity. But extensive research by state election officials, academic researchers, and bipartisan policy groups consistently find that non-citizen voting is exceedingly rare. Large-scale studies of millions of ballots have shown confirmed cases amounting to fractions of a percent and often the result of data errors, not intentional fraud. Existing law already makes illegal voting a felony, punishable by fines, prison time, and for non-citizens, deportation. At the same time, documentation-based requirements have been shown to block eligible voters who lack immediate access to passports or birth certificates. It often includes seniors, low-income voters, students, and women whose legal names have changed after marriage. As for the next steps, the SAVE Act has passed the U.S. House and now faces uncertain prospects in the Senate. Florida's HB 991 has cleared the House and must still pass the Senate before reaching the governor. And Michael, I'd like to start with you. There's so much going on the federal and the state level. What are the most important guts of these proposals, in your opinion?
Well, I would keep an eye out for the state legislation. So it did pass the House, and it's clearly going to pass the Senate. It's got a lot of support in the Republican-controlled legislature. Mm-hmm. And it would affect those who are registering to vote for the first time, or they need to move. And some, like if you have a name change, right? Let's say you get married and you're changing your name, you would have to bring a birth certificate or passport. There's a lot of people who don't have ready access to that. Mm-hmm. And so there's a concern, a very viable concern, that this would affect people who are just trying to exercise their right to vote. So when you look at what's going on in the House bill and the Senate, the companion bill in the House bill, if it's approved, it would start January 2027. However, the Senate companion bill, if it's approved, they're going for a July 1 start date, which would impact our midterm elections. Yeah, and when those two bills come together and they pass something, those points will be negotiated
ironed out. Yeah. Correct. Lindsay, who is affected by this? Which voters, and what should voters do as they track this?
Everyone's affected. Every single one of us will need to re-register essentially to vote. We'll have to provide this additional documentation when we show up at the polls. This is an extra step, an extra barrier to voting for every single voting citizen of the United States. And not to mention the people that don't have ready access to these, they'll have to go out and get a birth certificate, and maybe if they had a change of name, a court order that says their name was changed. Those things are not free. They're actually quite costly. And we've got Floridians who can barely pay the bills right now, and we're talking about adding an additional several hundreds of dollars per household to be able to vote. It's a poll tax. I mean, it's horrible.
And we have a state lawmaker, her grandmother was born in a rural hospital in Georgia. She doesn't have a birth certificate. So how does she go about getting one?
That's actually happening to a lot of students too, who are born in another country, here legally, became citizens, but in order to vote, they have to actually get their birth certificate from their home country being translated by the consulate, which has an unending time frame for it. But I want to go back to something that Lindsay said that's really valuable. We all sort of know that the federal SAVE Act isn't going to move forward, so we're really focusing on the state. And the reason why that's so important is because, you know, Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution says time, place, and manner of elections goes to states. So that takes away litigation that the federal level would have muckied this up. But in the state level, they have to face the 14th Amendment, the 24th Amendment, prohibition against poll tax. And what we saw with Amendment 4 a couple years ago, which we enfranchised disenfranchised voters that were felons, but they had to pay fees and restorations, the state of Florida very successfully defended that those fees and restorations were not poll taxes. So this is going to go through litigation, and it looks like there's a pathway, just like with Amendment 4, that this may be able to persist and survive that poll tax challenge.
When you look at the Constitution, so many folks say, who's in control of the elections? You were saying that it's who verifies the.
Well, constitutionally, Article 1 of the United States Constitution, Section 4, says time, place, and manner belongs to the states, but there's concurrent powers, right? And so states have that power, but the feds under the election clause have a power as well. But there's been a lot of constitutional fights about who has voter qualifications, which is the verification piece. It's never been settled law. So that's why we're all watching to see how Florida will really unveil this, how that will move through the federal legal system, and what the Supreme Court ultimately will say.